right, so time now for some further analysis on the 2018 budget, which was presented by the Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta in Parliament on Wednesday. Joining me in the studio now is Kojo Oppong. He's the Deputy Minister of Information. And then later on, we'll bring in to the discussion Adam Bona. He's a security expert or analyst. And so let's start off with Kojo Oppong, the Deputy Minister of Information. Now, one of the things that the Finance Minister has talked about in his budget is the reduction in electricity tariffs. We're looking at some 13% across board, except for industry of the mines, where we're looking at some 21%, which is quite significant. How is government pulling this off?
We have primarily believed that if you look at the comparative rates of, for example, the energy composition in, let's say, Ivory Coast and Ghana, all things being equal, we shouldn't be paying as much per kilowatt hour as we're paying. But because of a number of reasons in the energy sector, challenges on the production side, we've signed a lot of agreements with various independent power producers, many of which are not necessarily helpful to our cause. We have capacity charges that some analysts say we should not even be paying on that side. If you come to the ECG side, we have massive distribution losses. If you come onto the government side as well, you will find that government consumes a lot of power, doesn't pay in many areas. You have a debt that is growing. As at December 2016, it was about 10 billion Ghana cedis, and it's still rising because the key challenges in the structure have not been fully dealt with. So what government has done is to introduce a number of policy interventions in various areas. And it is our view that by the time these policy interventions kick in, we would have been able to clean up part of the challenges. The bond is part of it, cash waterfall is another part of it, reviewing the PPAs on the other side is another part of it, ECG, private sector participation, and it's another part of it. So our view is that by the time we are done with all of this, our energy sector will not be accumulating the debts that it's been accumulating. Now, in that regard, therefore, we can bring pricing to a good level. Indeed, today, after about 7 months of operating their SEMPA budget, we have been able to restore macro stability, but of course we need to sustain it for the whole 4 years of this first term of the Akufo-Addo administration. And our view is that with stability restored, we can now move on to reducing these rates as part of the bigger solutions to the challenges.
Right, so you're talking about a number of things that have to happen before the reduction happens, but the energy minister, the finance minister is actually saying that they've recommended to PRC that they want the tariffs reduced. Why is it that we're not doing all the things you're talking about before you tell the PRC that they should be looking at a reduction?
We have worked out our numbers and we have the view that we can do all of these things at the same time. You'll notice that we are tackling IPP issues, we're tackling ECG issues, we're tackling debt, literally all at the same time. It is our view that looking at the current numbers, we can handle this in the 2018 fiscal outlook, right. And that's why we are making this recommendation.
But if the electricity generating companies or VRA and the rest have to reduce tariffs, and we're looking at a debt situation in the sector as well, how are you reconciling the two? Otherwise, we're going to be ending up with a situation where the debts are actually going to increase, or we're going to be piling up more debt.
So you have to ask who's going to pay for this reduction. Now, tonight I've heard my friends on the minority side saying that they haven't seen the full fiscal numbers, and therefore they are limited in how much of a contribution they can make. When you look at the final fiscal numbers, I have had privy to see some of them. I don't have the full stock here. But if you look at the final fiscal numbers, we will be able to fund these reductions that we are talking about and whatever implications that it has on the backside to government.
Now let's talk about free SHS. Free SHS, government had indicated that it was going to spend about some 400 million cedis
for the first year, which was only for one term.
Which we're looking, apparently it turns out that it's going to be costing government a bit more than
of course, because for the first year we did the first term entrance, so that's just one term, that's 400 million. We have actually spent a bit more than that.
Exactly.
We have spent about 500 million thereabout on free SHS so far. Next year we envisage to spend between 1.2 1.6 on free SHS, and we also expect to make some money available for closing the infrastructure gap in the schools.
So we're talking about, you intended to spend 400, you're looking at spending 500, and yet you're going on to talk about absorbing exam fees for BEC and the rest.
We have actually spent about 500, I think it's 222 plus about 280 in the 2 tranches. But, you know, for all of these expenditure items, the question is it or is it not a priority of government? Our view is that if it is a priority of government, you will ring fence it and pay. And that's one of the things we did with free SHS this year. Remember, this free SHS debate has gone on for years. And the charge has always been that people don't believe we can find money for it. This year, when we budgeted for it, one of the first instructions was to make it priority expenditure and to ring fence it. And therefore, that's how come we're able to pay. In the 2018 fiscal cycle, again, it remains one of government's priorities. And it is to ring fence that expenditure item and ensure that we fully fund it as well.
One of the issues that has also come up with the budget from the minority side, they're talking about the fact that you have not been very consistent with the figures that you're putting out. You pick and choose. So when it comes to some of the figures, you refer to inflation, for instance, you're referring to figures that are not yet been made public by the Ghana Statistical Service, and they're wondering why you're bringing up those figures, and yet most of your figures are referring to the third quarter.
Because even the Ghana Statistical Service doesn't produce all of its data on a month-by-month basis. When you take GDP figures, for example, you've been in this business for a very long time. GDP figures are reported on a quarter-by-quarter basis. So quarter 1 GDP, quarter 2 GDP, quarter 3 GDP. The GDP figures we have now only ends at quarter 3, ends at September. But you have other indices that are calculated not necessarily according to quarters. So we are not picking and choosing. Indeed, it is how these data sets are made available that we are picking and making available to the country. So if all the data you have is as at half year, you will use it. If all the data you have is as at September, you will use it. If the data you have is quite recent, for example, the fiscal numbers, because our accounts are on a cash basis, you will use that as well. And this is not different from what has happened in previous budget cycles. It appears that our friends in the minority, I think because they want to raise some issues, now are picking all sorts of issues. You read their recent statement on the energy bond, came up with their own figures in it, and now sought to build a narrative on it. It has become a consistent pattern with them. But for us, these figures are not picked or chosen. They are figures that are available now. You can validate them at the Ghana Statistical Service.
One other controversial issue that the minority raised ahead of the presentation of the budget was the fact that we're going to have a mobile money tax coming. And they're saying that once they made noise about it, government decided to withdraw that. I mean, did government actually plan to do that?
It's a bit sad. You have been in this business. Anybody who's been in this business for a while knows that you don't write the budget 48 hours to time. Budget consultations, especially with the passage of the PFMA, budget consultations take sometimes 2 months. I've been there as we started engaging the banks and all the sectors and preparing the fiscal tables. These numbers were completed way ahead of time, even before they did their press conference. And that is why when they did their press conference predicting mobile money tax, predicting that austerity because of a 3.8% deficit, predicting that there will be hardship like 1983, debt to GDP ratio will go up to 76%. That's why we literally laughed, because we knew the numbers that we had. But let me tell you what has happened. The minority picked up the Article 4 consultation reports with the IMF, where various things are being discussed. For example, the deficit target that the IMF was initially pointing to, which was 3.8. For example, comments that or encouragements that were being made by the fund that we should look to taxing things like mobile money, etc. And then they built their press conference on that. It wasn't that they were privy to any instrument that we had. It was all in that report based on the conversations that we had had with the IMF, and they sought to build a narrative that they were privy to something they were not privy to.
Right. One other issue I'd like to bring up is the creation of the 100,000 jobs. The issue
through the national build is core.
Yeah, the issue has to do with why is it sitting at the presidency. We'll come to that in a bit. At this point, I'd like to introduce Adam Bona. He's a security analyst. He also has his own issues regarding the budget. He thinks that it's been very silent on security.
Yes, thank you very much, and good evening to your cherished listeners, and good evening to Honorable Kojo Oppong. Yes, I think 2017 January to date, some of the very disturbing issues we've had has had to do with security. We've had vigilantism, seizure of, toll booths. We've had, beating of DCs. We've had, taking over government properties. What have you? We've had accidents. We've had the atomic, junction. What do you call it? Explosion. You can count them. For some reasons, this current administration I think, started very well with regards to security and safety. If you realize, for the first time in the history of this country, we now have a national security minister, in addition to Minister of Interior and all those people. And so then the question is, I mean, all this GDP, you know, GTP, whatever they mention, it doesn't bother me. My question is that, where were all these people when the budget was being put together? Didn't they make any inputs? The president at the recent cybersecurity conference, he made a categorical statement. He did mention that he is going to ensure that, what do you call it, a budgetary allocation is captured in the 2018 budget. And it's been read. I went through it, I read the text, zero. Do we take the president's, what the president says, serious? The president wouldn't be the one writing the budget.
Right.
I engaged, what do you call it, the cybersecurity advisor, I think, Entry. Before even the president made that statement, he had actually said it on air. We met at one of your sister stations somewhere, and he said, yes, this is going to be captured. The president, after the gas explosion, he came out to say, we are going to put this in place, we are going to put this in place. We have 2018 budget read, and not one dime, not one dime has been allocated for security and safety.
Right.
Yeah.
Perhaps it's been captured in some fine detail. Kojo is here. Mr. Oppong,
no, so, let me agree with Adam. Security is a major concern. One of the reasons for which sometimes when you even instruct the police, arrest and deal with people, I'm sure you've seen photos of police taking people to court and not even having handcuffs, asking them to hold their clothes one by the other. The police service, for example, is, may I say, an institution that needs massive retooling. I do know that budgetary allocation has been made to assist in the retooling of our security agencies. What has happened is that, you know, in Parliament, you will lay the budget, which is in two parts, the economic policy of government, which is what was read today, and the fiscal tables. So you lay that one for the consideration of the House. But what the minister reads on the floor is what we call the policy speech. That's a budget speech. It doesn't cover everything. My ministry's activities were not captured in what the minister spoke about. So I do know that provisional allocation has been made for it in the substantive budget. In the speech, it was not covered. And I think that the criticism that security and the challenges being as important as it was, perhaps should have been covered. It's a fair criticism, and we take it on board.
No, I mean, I just think that I think the president is out of the country. I'm sure if he gets to know that security was not captured, was left out,
he wouldn't be happy.
I'm sure he'll be boiling, because
no, it was not left out.
I mean, it was left out.
But didn't feature in the speech, and I think it's fair to say that.
Let's say it the way it is until, you know, we have. I mean, I am not an economist. I don't pretend to be one. Kojo and Co. They should be able to tell us whether maybe early 2018 we are going to have a second reading in Parliament where all of us are going. I was paying attention, you know.
Okay. So the point he's making is that it's been captured. It falls under the retooling.
But in the speech that the minister read on the floor, you are right. It didn't feature in it. And I think it's fair criticism that for something as important as that, we should have captured it in the speech. And it's criticism we take in good faith. But that is not to say that the entire Interior Ministry and the retooling of the agencies, the police, and the other ones under it has not been captured. It is in the substantive budget.
Okay, so let's come back to the issue about the creation of the 100,000 jobs sitting at the presidency. Why is it sitting at the presidency?
Because we're of the view that it is something that requires dedicated attention and speed to deliver. We have a lot of faith in the civil service bureaucracy, but there are many projects that different governments situate at the office of the presidency to pay attention to it and to get it done and done quickly. You recall that when the Bui Dam was to be constructed, former President Kufuor was chairman of the board himself. He was chairman of Bui Power Authority, to sit on the board and make sure that it's driven and it's executed in good time, at good cost, and to precision. President Akufo-Addo feels very strongly about this National Builders Corps, and that's why it's been situated at the presidency, so that we'll see execution with quick speed.
The danger is that you're going to be ending up dishing out jobs to party people?
There is a risk with any activity that, if not properly regulated, it may end up being, a job for the boys. But I think President Akufo-Addo and this administration have demonstrated a lot of good faith, even in matters where you would have thought they did not require to put a tight regime around. We have forced ourselves to put such a tight regime around it so that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. So I'll give you a few examples. Take the development authorities. We said we're going to do IPEP and make available $1 million per constituency for various projects. But the president said, I don't want this money thrown out there so that people literally play hanky-panky with it. So I want you to put a law in place, put up development authorities, rules and regulations on how these projects are selected, monies are dispersed. That's what we've just passed in Parliament. There are things like the Office of the Special Prosecutor, where the president could have said, let the Attorney General do what ought to be done. But he says that in addition to the Attorney General, I want an independent special prosecutor who can even take on my own people, can investigate and take on my own people. I think that in that spirit, we can approach this with a mindset that says, how do we structure this in a manner that it doesn't become job for the boys, instead of the normal suspicion that it will become job for the boys. And I think that any ideas to ensure that it doesn't become job for the boys is a welcome idea.
All right. Now, just before you go, how about the Office of the Special Prosecutor? Has the president ascended to it yet?
I do not have information on that. We've been with a team working on the budget, so I haven't touched base with his office. I cannot speak to that at this moment.
All right. Thank you very much, Kojo Oppong. Kojo Oppong is the Deputy Minister of Information, and also I had here on the panel Adam Bona. He's a security analyst, bringing us some analysis as far as the budget that was presented by the Finance Minister. 2018 budget that was presented by the Finance Minister in Parliament today. Wednesday.